Let's take a look at that review for the assignment for round 1 and see what we got, see what we should have had. So Chester had the highest sales and the best profit, but Andrews had better earnings per share. And why? Quite simply because Chester sold shares, sold stock. That's something I want you guys to look at and to consider as we go along. Okay, and let's take a look at what we mean by that. So Chester, we all started with 2 million. Each team started with 2 million shares outstanding. All of a sudden, Chester has 2.116 or 166,619 shares, right? So they sold 166,619 shares. And as a result, even though it had higher sales, higher earnings, it did not have a higher earnings per share. Okay, how about its ROE? Let's go take a look at that as well. ROE, because I score on ROE, and its ROE was less too. Well, surprise, surprise, and, just to kind of do the math, had it not sold the stock, okay, it sold shares. That's all I was looking for in the answer. I added some because I want you guys to understand this, because I'll ask questions like this later on. I will want you to do the math. It diluted its shareholder base. It says the math, if Chester had not sold stock, its earnings per share would have been, its earnings, $10,457.182, right there, $10,457,182, sorry, divided by what would have been the 2 million, right? So its earnings per share would have been $5.23, which would have been higher than, right? 522 would have been higher than Andrews. Okay. That also, and again, here's something I want you to consider because it's going to be on future assignments. Definitely, it also affected its ROE. And how did it do that? Well, let's take a quick look at it. We'll come down here to the cash flow. And sale of common stock, $5.7 million for Chester. What's that mean? Well, that means that $5.7 million went right to equity. So all of a sudden, Chester's equity is bigger. It's greater. Okay? And so the return on equity, so you got the numerator denominator, right? So the denominator just became bigger, and so the overall ratio became smaller. So our return on equity became smaller as a result of the sale of that stock. And so Andrews had a higher ROE as a result. And did it need to? Well, no. I mean, here's what would have happened had it not sold that stock. Its cash would have been reduced by $5.7 million. Still would have had plenty of cash. Okay, it would have had about $18 million in cash. And its total equity would have come down by that $5 million as well. So its total equity then would have gone down to about 59, 58 something. Okay, right about in line with what Andrews' equity was, but it had higher profits, and so its ROE and earnings per share would have been greater. Okay, Chester's variable cost divided by sales equals 71.4%. That's the inverse of what number? And I just wanted you thinking about that income statement here. So variable cost divided by sales right there was equal to that 71.4%. Okay. I just want you thinking, this gets back to the actual dollar amount here isn't as important as that percentage and the 71.4, but we can get that simply by knowing that that's the inverse of the contribution margin. 28.6, the inverse means 1 minus, right? 1 minus our contribution margin of 28.6 is at 71.4. So our contribution margin tells us the story, right? So these guys had a 64%, right, variable cost. Okay, these guys had a 70.6% variable cost, right? You can go right down and you should be able to just look at that and then you can kind of tell. And that's an important number. Again, contribution margin is a huge thing. 3, why was Erie's depreciation significantly higher than each of the other teams? Quite simply because it's investment in plant improvements of $27.2 million. It's a purchase of assets that will then be depreciated. Okay, it did that to a far greater extent than other teams, and so it had higher depreciation, and that's important. Keep in mind though that purchasing assets, purchasing capacity, purchasing automation is not an expense. Okay, And so when you look at your income statement, the only expense that comes from purchasing those things is a little bit of increase in depreciation. It might increase your interest if you have to borrow money for it, but it's a little bit of an increase in depreciation. Okay, but you might outlay, in this case, $27.2 million, but that wasn't an expense. Okay, you won't see an expense like that on Erie's income statement, right? Let's go take a look at their income statement. Gotta come down, take a look at Erie's income statement, right? Over here. So variable cost, depreciation, SG&A. You see anything that's even close to that $27 million other than the variable costs? And the variable costs are the variable costs. That's labor and materials. That doesn't have anything to do with the plant improvements. No, all you see is in this case a relatively small increase in depreciation. Okay, that's an important thing to note. I think for some reason folks get hesitant to make some of those investments because they're afraid it might be an expense, and the truth is it's not. Okay, it increases the depreciation. It might have increased their interest some. Okay, they've got obviously they probably borrowed some money in order to make that happen. Okay, but the interest and the increase in depreciation are both tax deductible. Okay, so there can be some real positives, obviously, and the negatives, they're kind of deferred, I guess you would say, or depreciated out over time. So in the traditional segment, what's the difference between Digby's actual and potential sales? Use the actual figures from the market share report toward the bottom. So we're talking about Digby and the traditional segment. We don't really need to look at what the product is. It's going to be quite a ways down here. I'll try to scroll on down and see if we can find that. So Digby, let's come up here. The traditional is this first column basically on the left. And so we've got 19.7 was their potential. Its actual was 17.4. So a difference of 2.3%, I guess, if you did the math, would be the 2.3%. Okay, that's it for one. These build on each other. Okay, I'll ask you more detailed questions about these things as we go forward, about other things, obviously, but try to know and understand what we're doing and some of these things that I've talked about. Where I've shown you the math this time, you can count on me asking questions where that math's going to be very similar, or if not exactly the same, maybe different numbers, but exactly the same in the future. So know and understand those things, and it will help you tremendously as you go through assignments in the future.